The first time Mitchell saw her was in the service corridor of Sector 7, a shortcut he often took to shave 15 minutes off his delivery route. The corridor was eerily quiet that night, lacking the usual mechanical hums and distant clangs that typically echoed through Zoravan Prime's Undercity. Instead, there was only the acrid scent of scorched metal and electric ozone hanging in the air. Mitchell clutched the small package tighter against his chest. The delivery wasn't anything special, just some data chips for a tech repair shop on level 42, but it was his last run of the night, and he was eager to get home. The silence of the corridor made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. In Zoravan Prime, silence rarely meant anything good. The neon lights flickered overhead, casting strange, elongated shadows across the metallic walls. Mitchell quickened his pace, his boots echoing loudly against the floor. He rounded a corner and froze. The corridor ahead was in disarray. Panels had been torn from the walls, exposing tangles of wiring. Scorch marks blackened the ceiling, and there, in the middle of it all, stood the most terrifying and magnificent creature Mitchell had ever seen. She was tall, at least 7 feet, with powerful, muscular limbs covered in short, dark fur. Her face was a strange blend of humanoid and feline, with a broader nose, sharp canines visible beneath slightly parted lips, and eyes that glowed an eerie amber in the dim light. Curved horns protruded from her temples, sweeping back alongside her head, which was adorned with what looked like a mane of coarse hair that fell to her shoulders. Her hands ended in sharp, retractable claws, currently extended and dripping with something dark that Mitchell didn't want to identify. At her feet lay a body, or what remained of one. Mitchell couldn't tell if it was human or alien. He should have run. He should have turned around immediately and found another route. But shock kept him rooted to the spot for a crucial few seconds too long. Her head snapped up, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent. Those amber eyes locked onto him, and Mitchell felt his stomach drop. I'm just passing through," he stammered, taking a step back. "I didn't see anything." The creature tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like prey. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly smooth, though it carried an underlying rumble. "You shouldn't be here, little human. I'm leaving," Mitchell said, continuing his backward retreat. She moved with startling speed, covering the distance between them in 2 bounds. Before Mitchell could react, she was looming over him, her face inches from his. He could feel her hot breath on his skin. "You've seen me now," she said, something like amusement in her tone. "Seen what I can do." She gestured vaguely toward the scene behind her. "I won't tell anyone," Mitchell promised, his voice barely above a whisper. She leaned closer, inhaling deeply near his neck. Mitchell squeezed his eyes shut, certain he was about to join whatever unfortunate being lay mangled on the floor behind her. Instead, she made a sound, somewhere between a purr and a laugh. "I like your fear," she said. "It's honest." Her clawed hand moved to his face, the sharp tip of one claw tracing a line down his cheek without breaking the skin. "But fear isn't all I sense in you. There's something else. Something useful." Mitchell's mind raced. What could she possibly want from him? He was nobody, just a freelance courier trying to make ends meet in the Undercity. "What's your name?" she demanded. "Mitchell." "Mitchell," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "I am Gina." The name sounded oddly normal for such an otherworldly being. "You know these tunnels well?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. "Good. We will meet again, Mitchell. When we do, you will help me." "What if I don't want to?" Her lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing more of those sharp teeth. "You have no choice. I'm going to mark you." "Mark me?" Mitchell asked, confused and terrified by the implication. Gina leaned forward again, and this time Mitchell felt something, a strange, burning sensation at the base of his neck, like an ember being pressed against his skin. He gasped in pain. "There," she said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "Now you are mine. The mark will grow stronger. And when I need you, you will come." Before Mitchell could respond, alarms began blaring somewhere in the distance. Gina's ears twitched, and she glanced over her shoulder. "Go," she commanded, stepping back from him. "Take a different route." If you value your life, forget what you saw here tonight. Mitchell didn't need to be told twice. He bolted, running faster than he ever had before, the package still clutched tightly to his chest. He didn't slow down until he reached the main concourse of Level 42, where the bright lights and crowds of people offered some semblance of safety. As he handed over the package to the tech shop owner and collected his payment, Mitchell tried to convince himself that what had happened in the service corridor had been some kind of hallucination. Maybe he'd inhaled some toxic fumes from the factory levels. But when he returned to his tiny apartment and examined his neck in the mirror, he saw it, a small, strange symbol that looked like it had been burned into his skin. It wasn't a hallucination after all. Gina had marked him, and somehow, Mitchell knew she had meant every word she said. Mitchell tried to resume his normal life in the days following his encounter with Gina. He took his regular delivery routes, avoiding Sector 7 service corridors, instead opting for the longer but more populated main pathways through Zoravan Prime. He told himself that the mark on his neck was nothing, just a strange alien threat meant to frighten him into silence. But the mark didn't fade. If anything, it seemed to be getting more defined, the raised lines of the symbol becoming more pronounced against his skin. He took to wearing high-collared shirts to hide it, but that didn't stop the constant awareness of its presence, a persistent warmth that never quite dissipated. By the fifth day, Mitchell couldn't ignore the other changes either. His senses seemed sharper somehow. He could pick up scents he'd never noticed before, the distinct metallic tang of different alloys used in the city's construction, the pheromones and fierce sweat of the crowds he passed through, the lingering trail of someone who had walked a corridor hours earlier. His hearing had improved too. During a delivery to the upper levels, he found himself overwhelmed by the cacophony of sounds. Conversations from 30 feet away coming through as clearly as if the speakers were standing beside him. The grinding of the city's massive ventilation systems, the scurrying of vermin in the walls. But the most disturbing change was the pull, a constant tugging sensation at the back of his mind, directing him eastward toward the industrial sectors of the Undercity. Mitchell knew, without understanding how, that Gina was there. Sometimes the pull was faint, barely noticeable. Other times, particularly at night, it became so strong that Mitchell would wake up standing in his apartment's entryway, hand on the door, as if he'd been about to leave in his sleep. He tried drowning the sensation in cheap synth alcohol from the bar on level 38, but it only dulled the pull momentarily before coming back stronger than ever. It was during one of these drinking sessions, a week after his encounter with Gina, that Mitchell realized he was being followed. The man was good, professional grade, but Mitchell's enhanced senses picked up the same cologne at 3 different locations during his delivery route. When he caught a glimpse of the man's reflection in a shop window, tall, dressed in a gray tactical uniform with no insignia, Mitchell felt a spike of fear. Someone knew about his encounter with Gina, or at least suspected something. Mitchell ducked into a crowded marketplace, weaving through the dense throng of shoppers, both human and alien. He thought he'd lost his tail until he reached the elevator bank that would take him home. The man in gray was waiting there, now accompanied by 2 others in matching uniforms. Mitchell turned to run, but 2 more appeared behind him, moving to block his escape. They didn't draw weapons, but Mitchell could see the outlines of sidearms beneath their jackets. "Mitchell Harker," one of them said. "It wasn't a question. You need to come with us." "Why?" "I haven't done anything," Mitchell protested, looking for any opening, any escape route. "You've had contact with a Class A restricted xenobiological entity," the man replied flatly. "That makes you a person of interest." Mitchell's mind raced. Who were these people? Corporate security? Planetary police? Some shadowy government agency? It didn't matter. Their intentions couldn't be good. One of the men reached for Mitchell's arm. Acting on an instinct he didn't recognize as his own, Mitchell snarled and slashed out with his hand. To his horror, his fingernails had extended into short, claw-like points, tearing through the man's sleeve and drawing blood. Everyone froze, including Mitchell, who stared at his hand in shock. The momentary pause was broken by a sound that vibrated through the floor, a deep, resonant growl that Mitchell felt more than heard. The crowd in the marketplace scattered in panic, revealing Gina's imposing form stalking toward them. She looked even more terrifying than Mitchell remembered. Her mane seemed larger, bristling with tension, and her amber eyes burned with rage. She wore some kind of armor now, a patchwork of metal plates strapped to her torso and limbs that didn't fully conceal the powerful muscles beneath. Well, she purred, her voice carrying easily across the distance. The veiled hand has found my little marked one. She looked at Mitchell, and he could have sworn there was amusement in her eyes. Sooner than I expected, the men in gray had drawn their weapons, sleek pulse pistols aimed at Gina. Stand down, Kithari, one of them ordered. This doesn't have to get messy. Gina's laugh was a rumbling, terrifying sound. It always gets messy with your kind. Before Mitchell could process what was happening, Gina exploded into motion. She was a blur of fur, claws, and savage grace. The first two men went down before they could even fire, their throats torn out in a spray of crimson. The third got off a shot that grazed Gina's shoulder, leaving a scorched patch of fur, but it barely slowed her down. Mitchell stood frozen, watching the carnage unfold. The fourth man grabbed him, pressing a pistol to his temple. "Stop, or I'll kill him," the man shouted. Gina paused, blood dripping from her claws. Her eyes narrowed, and Mitchell felt a strange sensation, a tightening of the mark on his neck and a flash of what felt like instructions in his mind. Without conscious thought, Mitchell drove his elbow back into his captor's solar plexus. As the man doubled over, Mitchell twisted away from the gun and slashed with his newly discovered claws. His technique was clumsy compared to Gina's lethal grace, but it was enough to open a gash across the man's face. The distraction gave Gina the opening she needed to close the distance and finish him off. The fifth man had fled during the chaos. For a moment, the marketplace was silent save for Mitchell's ragged breathing and the gentle patter of blood dripping to the floor. You killed them all," Mitchell finally managed, staring at the carnage around them. Gina licked a spot of blood from her claws, her expression unconcerned. "They would have killed you. Or worse, used you to get to me." She looked him up and down. "The mark is progressing well. I didn't expect you to manifest claws so soon." Mitchell stared at his hands, the claw-like nails now retracting slowly back to normal fingernails, leaving no trace of their existence except for the blood under them. "What did you do to me?" he whispered. Gina approached him, and this time Mitchell didn't back away. The pull he'd been feeling for days was satisfied by her proximity, replaced by a strange, almost euphoric sense of rightness. "I told you," she said, reaching out to touch the mark on his neck. "I marked you. You're mine now. What does that even mean? What's happening to me?" Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "No time," Gina said, grabbing his arm. "We need to move. More will come." "More of what? Who were they?" "The Veil Hand. Hunters, enforcers. They police the boundaries between species." She pulled him toward a maintenance door. "They especially dislike my kind interfering with humans." "Interfering?" Mitchell repeated as she dragged him through the door and into a dimly lit service tunnel. "Is that what you call this? Turning me into... I don't even know what I'm becoming." Gina stopped so suddenly that Mitchell almost ran into her. She turned, her expression fierce. "You are becoming stronger," she said. "Better. The mark connects us. It allows a small portion of my essence to flow into you. I didn't ask for this. Few get to ask for their fate." She resumed walking, her stride long enough that Mitchell had to jog to keep up. "The Veiled Hand won't stop hunting us now. They've seen you with a mark. They know what it means, even if you don't." They descended through increasingly narrow and dilapidated tunnels, moving deeper into Zoravan Prime's undercity than Mitchell had ever ventured before. Here, the city's infrastructure was ancient, dating back to the original colony ship that had landed centuries ago. Water dripped from corroded pipes, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Eventually, they emerged into a cavernous space that might once have been a storage bay, but had long since been abandoned. The skeletal remains of old machinery loomed in the darkness. Gina led Mitchell to a corner where she had established some kind of camp. A nest of salvaged cushions and fabric surrounded by various containers and what looked like trophies from hunts, skulls, claws, and other unidentifiable alien remains. "We'll be safe here for now," she said. "The metal in these walls interferes with their tracking devices." Mitchell sank down onto a crate, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming him. The adrenaline rush was fading, leaving him shaky and nauseous. He looked at his hands, still stained with drying blood. "I killed a man," he said, the realization finally hitting him. I'm not. "The first is always difficult," Gina said, her tone surprisingly gentle. She knelt before him, taking his hands in her much larger ones. "But you did well. You listened to the mark, followed its guidance." "I felt you in my head," Mitchell said, "telling me what to do." Gina nodded. "That is part of the bond. It will grow stronger." Mitchell pulled his hand away. "I don't want it to grow stronger. I want it gone. I want my life back." His voice broke on the last word. Gina's expression hardened. "That is not possible. The mark is permanent. It will continue to change you until the bonding is complete." "What does that mean, complete?" Mitchell demanded. Gina stood and moved to one of the containers in her camp. She retrieved what looked like a first aid kit and began tending to the plasma burn on her shoulder. "My people, the Kithari, have a complex social structure," she explained as she worked. "We bond with those who prove useful or interesting. The mark creates a connection, allowing the marked one to share in the Kithari's strength and senses. In return, the marked one serves the Kithari who claim them." "I'm not your slave," Mitchell growled. "No," Gina agreed. "A slave would be useless to me. The mark doesn't compel obedience through force. It creates compatibility, alignment. You will come to see the world as I do, to want what I want." The implication sent a chill down Mitchell's spine. "You're brainwashing me?" Gina considered this. "Your mind remains your own, but your instincts, your physical being, these change to complement mine. Already you feel the pull toward me, yes? The sense of rightness when we are together." Mitchell couldn't deny it. Even now, sitting in this dank corner of the Undercity, surrounded by the macabre trophies of Gina's kills, he felt more at ease than he had in the days they'd been apart. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Out of everyone in Zoravan Prime, why mark me?" Gina finished bandaging her wound and turned her amber gaze on him. "You were there. You saw me. Most would have run immediately, or attacked, or frozen in terror until I killed them. But you were afraid, yet spoke to me, negotiated, showed spine." Her lips pulled back in that unsettling approximation of a smile. "And you smelled compatible." "Compatible," Mitchell repeated flatly. "For what?" "For what is to come." Gina's expression grew serious. "The Veiled Hand is not my only enemy in this city. I came to Zoravan Prime hunting something dangerous. The mark was not only for you, it was for me. I needed an anchor to this place, someone who knows its hidden paths." "You could have asked," Mitchell pointed out. "Would you have said yes?" Mitchell had to admit she had a point. "So what is it you're hunting?" Gina's eyes seemed to glow brighter in the dim light. "A rogue Kithari, one who has broken our most sacred laws." She gestured to a particularly large skull displayed prominently among her trophies. "Tarek was once my pack brother. We hunted together across 3 star systems. But he became corrupted." "Corrupted how?" "He discovered ancient technology, remnants of the precursors who once ruled this arm of the galaxy. He used it to alter himself, enhance his natural abilities. It drove him mad." Gina's voice grew hard. "He killed half our pack before fleeing. I tracked him to Zoravan Prime, but this city, it has too many places to hide. Too many scents and signals that mask his trail. And you think I can help you find him? You know this city in ways I cannot. Your kind blends in where I stand out. And now, with the mark binding us, you can sense Kithari. You will know when Tarek is near, just as you sense my approach at the marketplace." Mitchell thought back to the strange awareness he'd had moments before Gina appeared, a tingling at the base of his skull, a tightening of the mark on his neck. He had attributed it to fear, but now he realized it had been something else entirely. "And once we find Tarek, what then?" "I kill him," Gina said simply. "It is my duty." And after that, what happens to me? To this. Mitchell touched the mark on his neck. Gina tilted her head, studying him. The mark remains. The bond remains. But we would be free to choose its purpose. We? Mitchell asked skeptically. Yes, we. The marking is not merely a tool, Mitchell. It is sacred to my people. Once completed, it creates a lifetime bond. She moved closer to him, her massive form casting a shadow over him. You think I chose you merely for convenience? I could have marked anyone with knowledge of the city. I chose you because I saw potential in you. Mitchell wasn't sure if he should be flattered or terrified. Probably both. So I have no choice in any of this. I just have to accept that my life, as I knew it, is over. You always have choices, Gina countered. You could choose to fight the mark, resist its changes. It would be painful, possibly fatal, but it is a choice. You could choose to betray me to the veiled hand, though the mark would make that difficult, and I would know your intentions before you acted on them. She crouched down to his eye level, her face inches from his. Mitchell could see flecks of gold and copper in her amber eyes, where you could choose to embrace the mark, to see where this path leads, to become something more than you were. Mitchell held her gaze, searching for deception or manipulation and finding none. There was an intensity to Gina, a raw honesty that was both frightening and compelling. I need to think, he said finally. Gina nodded once and stood. Rest now. Your body is still adapting to the changes. We will speak more when you wake. As if her words had triggered it, exhaustion washed over Mitchell in a wave. He slumped down onto the nest of cushions, his eyes growing heavy. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was Gina taking up a vigilant position at the entrance to their hideout, her powerful form silhouetted against the dim light from the tunnel beyond. Mitchell's dreams were vivid and disjointed. Flashes of the marketplace massacre, the sensation of his claws tearing through flesh, but also older memories altered in strange ways. In his dreams, he ran through the streets of Zoravan Prime on all fours, his senses alive with information his human mind couldn't fully process. He hunted, he killed, he feasted. And always Gina was there, sometimes beside him, sometimes watching from a distance, but always present. He woke with a start, his heart pounding. The mark on his neck burned fiercely, and his fingertips tingled with the sensation of claws wanting to emerge. The dreams are normal. Gina's voice came from the darkness. Part of the adaptation. Mitchell sat up, trying to orient himself. He had no idea how long he'd been asleep, and in the perpetual twilight of the Undercity, there was no way to gauge the time. How much worse is it going to get? He asked, his voice rough with sleep. Gina moved from her position at the entrance, approaching with a container of water, which she offered to him. The physical changes have only just begun. Your senses will continue to sharpen. Your strength and speed will increase. You'll develop instincts that feel foreign at first. Mitchell drank deeply, suddenly aware of how thirsty he was. Will I end up looking like you? Gina made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, the mark doesn't transform you into Kithri. It adapts you to be compatible with one. You'll remain recognizably human, though perhaps an enhanced version. Enhanced, Mitchell repeated skeptically, handing back the water container. That's one way to put it. Gina regarded him curiously. You speak as if these changes are a curse. Many would consider them a gift. A gift I never asked for, Mitchell pointed out. But even as he said it, he had to acknowledge a certain truth in her words. Despite the fear and confusion, part of him, a growing part, was fascinated by the new sensations, the strength he'd never possessed, the world of scents and sounds that had been hidden from him until now. Few of life's most significant gifts are asked for, Gina replied philosophically. Before Mitchell could respond, the mark on his neck flared with heat, and he sensed something, a presence approaching. From Gina's sudden alertness, she felt it too. Someone's coming, Mitchell whispered, instinctively moving closer to Gina. Not someone, Gina corrected, her voice dropping to a low growl. Kithri. Tarek, Mitchell asked, his heart rate spiking. Gina shook her head. No, different scent, but familiar. Her eyes widened slightly. Varric, my hunt's sister. Is that good? Uncertain, Gina replied, moving to position herself between Mitchell and the entrance. She may be here to help, or to stop me. Stop you from what? Killing Tarek? From marking you, Gina said grimly. It is not entirely sanctioned by our elders. Mitchell wanted to ask more, but the approaching presence was now close enough that even his less developed senses could detect it clearly. A scent like Gina's, but more floral, somehow lighter, and the almost imperceptible sound of careful movement in the tunnel. A figure appeared at the entrance, another Kithari female, similar to Gina in general build, but with important differences. Where Gina's fur was a deep, midnight blue-black, this newcomer's was a tawny gold. Her mane was braided elaborately and adorned with small metallic beads that clinked softly when she moved. Her horns were more delicate than Gina's, curving in an elegant spiral, and her eyes, when they fixed on Mitchell, were a brilliant emerald green. Sister, the newcomer said, her voice musical compared to Gina's deeper tones. I see the rumors are true. Varric, Gina acknowledged, her posture tense, but not overtly aggressive. How did you find us? Varric's gaze flicked to Mitchell, then back to Gina. The human bears your mark. The connection between you creates a resonance that those who know what to listen for can detect. She took a step forward, and Gina growled in warning. Varric stopped, raising her hands in a placating gesture. I'm not here on behalf of the elders, she assured Gina. I came as soon as I heard about Tarek, and about your solution to finding him. Mitchell felt distinctly uncomfortable being discussed as a solution rather than a person. The Veiled Hand has already found us once, Gina said. If you could track us through the mark, so can they. Varric shook her head. They can't sense it as we do. They only know its effects when they see them. Her green eyes settled on Mitchell again, studying him with open curiosity. May I? Gina hesitated, then stepped aside, though she remained close enough to intervene if necessary. Varric approached Mitchell slowly, as one might approach a skittish animal. Despite himself, Mitchell found he was fascinated by this new Kithari. Where Gina exuded danger and raw power, Varric moved with a lithe grace that was almost hypnotic. She stopped a few feet from him, inhaling deeply. Interesting choice, sister, she murmured, circling Mitchell slowly. Not what I would have expected from you. He's delicate. He's stronger than he appears, Gina countered. The mark is taken well. So I see, Varric said, pausing behind Mitchell. He felt her presence acutely, the mark on his neck tingling in response to her proximity. May I examine it? Mitchell looked to Gina, who gave a slight nod. He tilted his head, allowing Varric to see the mark. Cool fingers touched his skin, tracing the lines of the symbol burned there. Mitchell shivered at the contact. Third tier already, Varric noted, sounding impressed. The compatibility must be exceptional. She moved back into Mitchell's field of vision. You've chosen a difficult path, human. I'm not sure you understand what you've become part of. I'm trying to figure that out, Mitchell replied. Gina hasn't been big on explanations. Varric's lips curled in what was unmistakably a smile. That sounds like my sister. Always action first, words later. She glanced at Gina. You haven't told him about the full implications of a third-tier mark, have you? Gina's fur bristled slightly. There hasn't been time. Varric hummed skeptically, then turned back to Mitchell. The mark has stages, human. What you bear is already beyond a simple hunting bond. It's approaching a life bond, what you might call a mating mark. Mitchell's eyes widened. What? Enough, Gina growled, stepping between them. We have more pressing concerns. The Veiled Hand knows we're in the Undercity, and Tarek is still out there. Varric's expression sobered. Yes, Tarek. I tracked him to Zoravan Prime independently. He's been busy since he fled our territory. What do you mean? Gina asked sharply. He's gathering followers. Other rogues, outcasts from various packs. And he's continuing his experiments with a precursor technology. Varric's voice grew grim. He's building something, sister. Something big in the deepest levels of this city. Gina hissed, a sound of pure fury. I knew I sensed others. How many? At least 5 full Kithari that I've confirmed. Possibly more. And others. Others? Mitchell asked. Varric looked at him. Marked once. Like you, but wrong. Corrupted. Tarek has been marking humans too, but his method is crude. Forced. Many don't survive the process. Mitchell felt sick, and those that do become little more than extensions of his will. Weapons. Tools. Varric's gaze softened with what might have been pity. Nothing like what you are becoming. We need to find him, Gina said, pacing now, before he completes whatever he's building. I have a general location, Varric offered. The old reactor levels beneath the original landing site. But it's a maze down there and heavily guarded. Gina turned to Mitchell. This is where you help us. You know the Undercity. How do we reach these lower levels without alerting Tareka's sentries? Mitchell's mind raced. The reactor levels were notorious. A forbidden zone that even the most desperate Undercity dwellers avoided. Rumors of radiation, structural instability, and worse kept most people away. But as a courier, Mitchell had memorized maps of Zoravan Prime that few others had access to, including some of the original colony ship schematics. There might be a way, he said slowly. Maintenance shafts that connect to the old cooling systems. They run parallel to the main reactor chamber, but were sealed off after the primary systems were decommissioned. He closed his eyes, visualizing the schematics. If they're still intact, we could bypass most of the obvious entry points. Gina and Varric exchanged a look that Mitchell couldn't interpret. It's a start, Gina decided. But first, you need to complete your transformation. Mitchell tensed. What do you mean? The mark has progressed quickly, but it's still not complete, Gina explained. If we're going to face Tarek and his pack, you need to be at full strength. And how exactly do we complete it? Mitchell asked. Warily. Gina approached him, her expression intense. The final stage requires a ritual, a sharing of blood and essence. Mitchell took an involuntary step back. That sounds intimate. It is, Varric interjected, her tone suggesting she found his discomfort amusing. But necessary if you're to survive what's coming. She looked at Gina. I'll scout ahead, make sure our path to these maintenance shafts is clear. You too, complete your business. With a final knowing glance between them, Varric slipped out of the hideout, leaving Mitchell alone with Gina. A heavy silence fell between them. Is she right? Mitchell finally asked. Is this mark actually a mating bond? Gina's ears flattened slightly, a sign of discomfort, Mitchell realized. Kithri bonding is complex. The mark can serve many purposes: hunting, protection, partnership. But the one you gave me? Gina met his eyes directly. I did not plan for it to progress so quickly. Such deep compatibility is rare between species. But yes, what you bear now is evolving toward a life bond. Mitchell ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this new information. So you're saying we're what? Getting married? Gina made that rumbling laugh sound again. A crude comparison, but not entirely inaccurate. She moved closer, and Mitchell found himself unable to step away this time. Does the idea disturb you so much? Mitchell wasn't sure how to answer. 2 weeks ago, he would have been repulsed by the very concept. But now, with the mark burning on his neck and Gina's powerful presence before him, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. It wasn't just the physical changes or the psychic connection. There was something else, something he couldn't articulate but felt deeply. I barely know you, he said instead. The mark knows me, Gina countered. And I know you, Mitchell, more than you realize. Each day we've been connected, I've felt your thoughts, your emotions, as you've felt mine. Mitchell realized with a start that she was right. He had sensed her emotions, her determination, her rage when the veiled hand appeared, her wariness when Varric arrived. They hadn't been distinct from his own feelings, but rather woven through them, as if their emotional states were overlapping. The ritual will complete this connection, Gina continued. It will give you the full strength and abilities you'll need to face Tarek. And if I say no, Gina didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Then we go as we are, and hope it's enough. I won't force this bond, Mitchell. A forced bond is what Tarek creates, a perversion of our ways. The admission surprised him. For all her talk of you're mine, and you have no choice, here she was giving him one. Mitchell touched the mark on his neck, feeling its warmth, the connection it represented. He thought of the changes he'd already undergone, the heightened senses, the strength, the strange new instincts. He thought of how, despite his fear and resistance, part of him had thrilled at the marketplace fight, at the raw power he'd tapped into. And if he was honest with himself, he thought of how his old life, the endless courier runs, the tiny apartment, the solitary existence, suddenly seemed pale and empty compared to the vivid intensity of these past days with Gina. "What does the ritual involve?" he asked finally. The relief in Gina's expression was unmistakable. "Blood and breath," she said. "A mutual exchange. The final key that unlocks the mark's full potential." Mitchell took a deep breath. "All right, let's do it." Gina stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She took his face in her hands, her claws retracted now, her touch surprisingly gentle for a creature of such strength. "This will hurt," she warned, "but only for a moment." Mitchell nodded, steeling himself. Gina leaned down, pressing her forehead against his in a gesture that seemed almost tender. Then, in a swift motion, she bit into the juncture of his neck and shoulder, directly over the mark. Pain flared, sharp and bright, but it was quickly replaced by a sensation like liquid fire flowing through his veins. Mitchell gasped, his legs nearly buckling. Gina supported him with one powerful arm while using a claw to open a small cut on her own chest, just above her heart. "Now you," she instructed, guiding his mouth to the wound. Mitchell hesitated only briefly before pressing his lips to the cut, tasting the alien copper of her blood. It burned like strong alcohol going down, spreading warmth throughout his body that intensified to an almost unbearable heat. The mark on his neck flared with brilliant pain, and Mitchell felt something fundamental shifting within him. Cells reconstructing, neural pathways realigning, his very DNA rewriting itself to accommodate the alien essence now fully merging with his own. Images flooded his mind, memories that weren't his. A world of red skies and twin moons, the thrill of a hunt through dense jungles, the comfort of a pack sleeping in a tangled heap of fur and limbs. Gina's life, her experiences, flowing into him alongside her blood. And he knew she was experiencing the same. His childhood on a crowded orbital habitat, his struggle to make a life in Zoravan Prime, his loneliness, his stubborn determination to survive. When they finally separated, Mitchell felt fundamentally changed. His senses were razor-sharp now, his body humming with new strength. The mark on his neck had spread, intricate patterns extending down his spine and across his shoulder blades. But the most profound change was the connection. Gina's presence in his mind was no longer a vague pull, but a clear, constant awareness. He could sense her emotions, her thoughts, as distinctly as his own. "It's done," Gina said softly, her amber eyes glowing as they studied him. "The bond is complete." Mitchell looked down at his hands, seeing that his fingernails had permanently altered, thicker and slightly curved, capable of extending into the claw-like weapons he'd used in the marketplace. His musculature had changed too, denser now, his movements more fluid as he flexed and tested his new form. "I feel," he began, struggling to find the words. "Whole," Gina supplied, "as you were meant to be." And despite everything, the danger they faced, the strangeness of it all, Mitchell couldn't argue with that assessment. For the first time in his life, he felt as though he fit perfectly within his own skin. "Now," Gina said, her voice taking on the edge of a predator ready to hunt, "let's find Tarek." The journey to the old reactor levels was perilous. Varric had returned with news that the Veiled Hand had established checkpoints throughout the Undercity, searching for them systematically. They were forced to take increasingly obscure routes, sometimes crawling through maintenance ducts so narrow that Gina and Varric had to compress their powerful frames to squeeze through. Mitchell led the way, drawing on his courier's knowledge of Zoravan Prime's hidden pathways, now enhanced by his sharpened senses and the occasional bursts of intuition that came through his bond with Gina. He could feel her constant presence in his mind, a reassuring weight that steadied him when fear threatened to take hold. As they descended deeper into the city's foundations, The infrastructure grew more ancient and decrepit. The sleek metals and polymers of the upper levels gave way to cruder alloys and primitive concrete structures dating back to the original colony. The air grew thick with the sense of rust, mildew, and something else, an acrid, electric smell that reminded Mitchell of Gina's scent, but corrupted somehow. "We're getting close," Varric murmured as they paused at a junction. "I can smell them." Gina nodded, her nostrils flaring. 5, no, 6 Kithari, and many marked ones. Mitchell concentrated, testing his new abilities. Beyond the immediate sense of decay in metal, he could indeed detect the presence of other Kithari, similar to Gina and Varric, but with subtle differences that his mind somehow categorized as wrong or tainted. And there were human scents too, but altered, as if the people they belonged to were no longer fully human. "The maintenance shaft should be just ahead," Mitchell whispered, pointing to a rusted hatch in the floor. "It'll take us down to the cooling system level, parallel to the main reactor chamber." Gina placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was both possessive and supportive. "You've done well, bringing us this far." Mitchell felt a flush of pride at her approval, a reaction that would have annoyed his old self, but now felt natural. The bond worked both ways, he was learning. Just as he was influenced by her, she too was affected by him, her typically brusque manner softening when they touched. Varric rolled her eyes at the display, but there was no real malice in her expression. "If you two are finished, we have a rogue to hunt." Gina removed her hand from Mitchell's shoulder, her focus returning to the mission. "Mitchell goes first," she decided. "His scent is still mostly human. If there are sentries, they'll be less likely to notice him immediately." Mitchell nodded and moved to the hatch, working the ancient mechanism until it grudgingly opened with a groan of protest. Below, a narrow metal ladder descended into darkness. Drawing on his enhanced vision, one of the many gifts of the completed mark, Mitchell could make out the bottom of the shaft about 30 feet down. He began to climb down, moving as silently as his new abilities allowed. The maintenance tunnel at the bottom ran straight ahead, illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency strips that had somehow maintained power after centuries of neglect. Mitchell waited for Gina and Varric to join him, their larger forms making the descent more awkward but no less graceful. Together, they moved forward, alert for any sign of Terrica's sentries. The tunnel branched several times, but Mitchell navigated confidently, following both the old schematics in his memory and the growing scent of Kithari activity. They had gone perhaps half a kilometer when Mitchell froze, signaling the others to stop. Ahead, where the tunnel opened into what should have been an equipment room, he could hear movement, the soft pad of feet and the low murmur of voices. 2 of them, he whispered, the words barely audible even to Kithari hearing. "One Kithari, one, altered human." Gina nodded, pressing close to communicate through their bond rather than with words. Mitchell received her plan as a series of impressions and images rather than coherent thoughts. A coordinated attack, with him approaching openly while she and Varric moved along the ceiling pipes to flank the sentries. It was a good plan, utilizing his more human appearance as a distraction. Mitchell steeled himself and continued forward, alone now as Gina and Varric silently ascended to the tunnel's ceiling, using their claws to grip the exposed pipes and struts. He emerged into the equipment room, trying to appear lost and confused, not difficult given his surroundings. The room was vast, filled with ancient machinery whose purpose was no longer clear. Catwalks crisscrossed overhead, and massive pipes ran along the walls, many of them cracked or broken. The sentries spotted him immediately. The Kithari was smaller than Gina, with reddish fur and a scarred face that suggested he'd seen many battles. The human beside him was a grotesque sight, his body warped by what Mitchell now recognized as a corrupted version of the mark, his skin stretched tight over unnaturally bulging muscles, his eyes vacant and feral. "A human wanderer," the Kithari sentry remarked, his voice a harsh rasp. Far from the upper levels, Mitchell raised his hands in apparent surrender. "I got lost," he said, putting a tremor in his voice. I was trying to find a way back up. The Kithri approached, sniffing the air. You smell strange, not entirely human. Mitchell tensed, ready to attack if his ruse failed. But at that moment, Gina and Varric dropped from above, landing silently behind the sentries. Before the Kithri could turn, Gina had severed his spine with a powerful slash of her claws. Varric dispatched the corrupted human with equal efficiency, a quick twist of his neck ending his life before he could cry out. Well done, Gina told Mitchell, her approval warming him through their bond. They hid the bodies behind some of the larger machinery, then continued through the equipment room toward a massive set of blast doors on the far side. The doors stood partially open, jammed by centuries of disuse and structural shifting. Beyond lay the cooling system level, a vast space filled with enormous pipes and conduits that had once channeled water to moderate the reactor's temperature. Most were now dry and rusted, but some still dripped with condensation, creating small pools on the floor that they carefully avoided to maintain silence. It was here that they found the first clear evidence of Terrica's work. Cables ran along the floor. New cables, not part of the original infrastructure. They snaked through the room, connecting salvage power cells to something deeper in the complex. Following the cables led them to another set of doors, these fully open and clearly in regular use. The scent of Kithri was much stronger here, along with an acrid odor that Mitchell now recognized as the precursor technology Gina had mentioned. They paused at the threshold, sensing the danger ahead. This is it, Varric whispered. Terrica's main base is just beyond. Gina nodded, her expression grim. I can smell him now. And something else. The precursor device. Mitchell concentrated, extending his senses through the bond, borrowing Gina's more experienced perception. Yes, there was something beyond the door, something that made his skin crawl with wrongness, a technology that seemed to warp the very fabric of reality around it. What's the plan? He asked quietly. Gina's eyes gleamed in the dim light. We hunt. Together. The chamber beyond the doors was massive. The original reactor chamber, now repurposed for Terrica's mysterious project. The central reactor core had been removed centuries ago, leaving a vast cylindrical space that dropped several stories to the lower levels. Around the perimeter of this central pit, Terric had established his operation. Mitchell counted at least a dozen corrupted humans working at various stations, their movements mechanical and coordinated. For Kithri supervised them, stalking the chamber with predatory alertness. And there, at the far side of the chamber, stood Terric himself. He was larger than any Kithri Mitchell had yet seen, his fur a mottled gray and black that seemed to shift and writhe in the strange light. His horns had been augmented with metal, implants that curved forward like deadly hooks, and his eyes glowed an unnatural blue. Parts of his body had been replaced with cybernetic enhancements. His right arm was entirely mechanical, and patterns of circuitry were visible beneath his fur in places where it had thinned. But most disturbing was the device he stood before, a pulsating construction of metal and crystal that seemed to bend the light around it. It resembled a gate or portal, its framework inscribed with symbols that hurt Mitchell's eyes to look at. Energy crackled within the frame, creating distortions in the air that suggested it was already partially active. A dimensional gate. Varric breathed, horror in her voice. He's building a bridge to the precursor realm. Gina's fur bristled with rage. Fool! The precursors were banished for a reason. Their influence corrupts all it touches. Mitchell felt sick looking at the gate. Something about it triggered a primal fear, a certainty that whatever lay on the other side was never meant to enter their world. How do we stop it? He asked. Destroy the gate, Gina said firmly. Kill Terric. It sounded simple, but Mitchell knew it would be anything but. They were outnumbered, and Terrica's corrupted followers would fight to the death. We need a distraction, Varric suggested. Something to scatter his forces. Mitchell studied the chamber, his courier's eye for detail combining with his new Kithri-enhanced senses. He noticed power conduits running along the ceiling, connecting to different sections of the facility. There, he pointed, If we overload those power junctions, it could cause explosions throughout the chamber. Create chaos. Gina followed his gaze and nodded approvingly. It could work. I'll confront Tarek directly. He's mine to kill. Varric, you handle his Kithri lieutenants. Mitchell, I'll set off the overloads, he finished, understanding her plan through their bond. And then help Varric with the lieutenants. They separated, each moving to their designated position. Mitchell circled the upper level of the chamber, staying in the shadows, making his way toward the first power junction. Gina and Varric positioned themselves for their attack, waiting for his signal. Reaching the junction, Mitchell extended his claws and slashed through the insulation of the main power cable, exposing the superconducting core. He created a short circuit that would build to overload in about 30 seconds, then quickly moved to the next junction. He had just finished sabotaging the third junction when one of the corrupted humans spotted him. The man gave a distorted howl of alarm, alerting the others to the intruder. Mitchell abandoned stealth and ran for the final junction, knowing time was now short. Behind him, he heard the distinct sounds of Kithri combat, roars, snarls, and the wet tearing of flesh. Gina and Varric had launched their attack. Reaching the last junction, Mitchell tore open the panel and ripped out handfuls of wiring, creating a chaotic mess of connections that would inevitably overload. He had just finished when the first junction exploded, sending a shower of sparks and debris across one section of the chamber. The explosions triggered exactly the chaos they'd hoped for. The corrupted humans scattered in confusion, while the Kithri lieutenants looked around for the source of the attack. In that moment of distraction, Gina made her move, charging directly at Tarek with a roar that shook the chamber. Tarek turned, his unnatural blue eyes widening in recognition. "Sister," he growled, his voice distorted by the cybernetics embedded in his throat. "You've come to join me after all. I've come to end you," Gina snarled, launching herself at him with claws extended. The two Kithri collided in a blur of fur and claws, their battle so fast and ferocious that Mitchell could barely track it. Tareka's cybernetic arm gave him unnatural strength, allowing him to match Gina's natural power. Meanwhile, Varric engaged the four lieutenants, her fighting style more graceful and evasive than Gina's direct approach. She darted between them, inflicting deadly wounds before dancing away from their counterattacks. Mitchell leapt down to join the fray, his newly enhanced body responding with a speed and strength that still surprised him. He tackled one of the lieutenants who had been about to flank Varric, slashing with his claws across the Kithri's throat. The move saved Varric but left Mitchell exposed to the corrupted humans, who now turned their attention to him. Unlike true Kithri, these twisted creatures had no skill or strategy, only bestial ferocity and the unnatural strength granted by their corrupted marks. Mitchell fought desperately, using his speed and the combat instincts flowing through his bond with Gina. He took down two of the corrupted humans, but there were too many. They swarmed him, their warped bodies pressing in from all sides. Just as he was about to be overwhelmed, the second and third junctions exploded simultaneously. The blast was far larger than Mitchell had anticipated, collapsing a section of the upper walkway and sending it crashing down onto several of the corrupted humans. The brief respite gave Mitchell a chance to assess the larger battle. Varric had killed 3 of the 4 lieutenants, but was badly wounded, her golden fur matted with blood as she squared off against the final one. And Gina was in trouble. Tarek had driven her back against the dimensional gate, the energies crackling around her fur as she struggled to fend off his augmented attacks. Even from a distance, Mitchell could feel her pain and fatigue through their bond. Without conscious thought, Mitchell found himself running toward them, driven by an instinct deeper than fear. He leapt over debris and fallen bodies, focused entirely on reaching Gina. Tarek had her pinned now, his cybernetic arm crushing her throat while his natural hand raised for a killing blow. Mitchell reached them just as the claws began to descend. With a roar that didn't sound human, Mitchell slammed into Tarek's side, disrupting his attack and forcing him to release Gina. Tarek turned to him in surprise, clearly not expecting a human to possess such strength or daring. "What is this?" Tarek growled, his glowing eyes narrowing as he noticed the mark visible on Mitchell's neck. "You've taken a human bondmate, sister. How far you've fallen." Mitchell circled warily, keeping Tarek's attention on him while Gina recovered. Through their bond, he felt her gratitude mingled with fear for his safety. "I'm not just her bondmate," Mitchell said, feeling the full power of the mark flowing through him. "I'm her pack." Tarek laughed, a distorted, mechanical sound. "A human cannot be pack. You're nothing but a tool, a pet." "Mitchell," Gina called, her voice rough from near strangulation. "The gate. Destroy the gate." Mitchell understood immediately. The dimensional gate was nearly active, its energy field expanding with every passing second. If it fully engaged, whatever waited on the other side would emerge. Tarek realized their intention and lunged at Mitchell with terrifying speed. Mitchell barely avoided the attack, the cybernetic claws tearing through his sleeve and grazing his arm. Pain flared, but Mitchell used it, channeling the sensation into focused rage as Gina had taught him through their bond. He ducked another swipe and darted past Tarek, heading for the gate's control console. Tarek roared in fury and pursued, but Gina intercepted him, re-engaging him in combat with renewed ferocity. Through their bond, Mitchell felt her determination. She would hold Tarek as long as necessary, even at the cost of her life. Reaching the console, Mitchell found it incomprehensible, a mix of Kithri script and what must be precursor symbols. There was no time to decipher it. Instead, he extended his claws to their full length and began tearing into the machine, ripping out components and slashing through power conduits. The gate's energy field fluctuated wildly, expanding and contracting in unstable pulses. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber, rising in intensity until it was almost unbearable. "No!" Tarek's voice cut through the noise. He broke free from Gina and charged toward Mitchell, his cybernetic arm transforming into a blade-like appendage. Mitchell turned to face him, knowing he couldn't evade in time. He braced for the impact, determined to keep damaging the gate until his last breath. But the blow never came. Varric appeared behind Tarek, bloody but still fighting. She drove her claws deep in his back, piercing through to his chest cavity. Tarek staggered, his momentum carrying him forward even as life began to drain from his body. His blade arm lashed out in a final, desperate attack. Mitchell felt searing pain as the blade sliced across his chest, cutting deep. He fell back against the console, blood pouring from the wound. Through dimming vision, he saw Gina reach them. With a roar of pure rage, she seized Tarek's head in both hands and twisted, the sound of breaking bone audible even over the gate's increasing whine. Tarek collapsed, dead at last. But the gate was still active, its instability growing by the second. "It's going to collapse," Varric shouted. "We need to get out now." Gina ignored her, rushing to Mitchell's side. "Mitchell," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she assessed his wound. "Stay with me." Mitchell could feel himself weakening, the bond between them flickering like a candle in the wind. "Finish the gate," he managed. Gina understood. She turned to the gate, drawing on the strength of their bond, what remained of it as Mitchell's life ebbed away. With a final, mighty effort, she drove her claws into the heart of the dimensional gate, tearing out its core. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The gate's energy field collapsed in on itself, creating a vacuum that pulled at everything nearby. Equipment, bodies, and debris flew toward the imploding gate. "Run!" Gina shouted to Varric, lifting Mitchell in her arms. Together, they fled the chamber as the implosion grew, consuming Tarek's body and his twisted creations. They barely made it to the cooling system level before the gate's final collapse triggered a shockwave that knocked them off their feet. The ancient ceiling groaned ominously as support structures began to fail. "The whole area is coming down," Varric said, picking herself up. "We need to move." Gina cradled Mitchell against her chest, her expression anguished as she felt their bond continuing to weaken. "He's dying," she said, her voice breaking. I can feel him slipping away. Varric looked at Mitchell's wound and then met Gina's eyes. There's one way, she said hesitantly. But it's forbidden. I don't care, Gina growled. Tell me. The blood of 3 Kithari, Varric explained quickly. A trinity bond. It could strengthen him enough to survive until we reach the surface. Gina didn't hesitate. Do it. Varric slashed her own wrist, then took Mitchell's limp hand and cut his palm. Your blood now, sister, she instructed. Gina cut her palm as well, and the 3 wounds were pressed together. Kithari blood mixing with Kithari blood, and both with Mitchell's fading human essence. The effect was immediate. Mitchell gasped, his eyes flying open as new strength flowed into him. The mark on his neck flared brilliantly, extending further across his body in intricate patterns as the Trinity bond took hold. Now go, Varric said, swaying slightly from the blood loss and her previous injuries. I'll find my own way out. Varric, Gina began. Go, Varric insisted. The bond won't last long. Get him to the surface where you can properly heal him. With a nod of deep gratitude, Gina lifted Mitchell and began running through the collapsing tunnels, following the route they had used to enter. Behind them, the reactor chamber imploded completely, sending tremors through the entire Undercity. The journey back was a blur to Mitchell, his consciousness fading in and out. He was aware of Gina's powerful arms carrying him, of the bond between them strengthened by Varric's sacrifice, and of pain, constant, burning pain as his body fought to heal the grievous wound Tarek had inflicted. At some point, they emerged into one of the main tunnels of the Undercity, and then into a crowded market area. People screamed and scattered at the sight of a blood-covered Kithari carrying a wounded human. But Gina ignored them all, her focus entirely on reaching safety. Mitchell's next clear memory was of a room. Not Gina's lair in the abandoned storage bay, but somewhere new. A proper dwelling with actual furniture and medical equipment. He lay on a bed, his chest bandaged, the pain dulled to a manageable throb. Gina sat beside him, her powerful form hunched in what looked like exhaustion. When she saw he was awake, her amber eyes brightened. You live, she said simply, but the relief in her voice was palpable. Mitchell tried to speak, found his throat too dry, and gratefully accepted the water Gina held to his lips. Tarek? He asked after drinking. Dead, Gina confirmed, and his gate destroyed. Varric? Gina's expression softened. She found her way out. She's recovering in the next room. Mitchell relaxed slightly, relieved that their ally had survived. Where are we? The safe house in the mid-levels, Gina explained. One of several I established when I first came to Zoravan Prime. Mitchell nodded, then winced as the movement sent a spike of pain through his chest. How bad is it? You nearly died, Gina said bluntly. Tareka's blade penetrated deeply. Without the Trinity bond, you would not have survived long enough for treatment. Mitchell remembered the desperate ritual in the collapsing tunnels, the mingling of blood, the surge of strength that had followed. The Trinity bond? What does it mean? Gina hesitated, an unusual display of uncertainty from her. It complicates things, she admitted finally. A normal mark creates a bond between 2. A Trinity bond connects 3 in a balanced relationship. It's rare, sacred in our culture. Mitchell absorbed this. So, I'm bonded to Varric now, too? Yes and no. The primary bond remains between us. Varric is connected but less deeply, a pack sister to both of us. Gina looked uncomfortable discussing the nuances. It's complicated. Mitchell almost laughed despite the pain. Everything about this has been complicated from the start. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with her larger ones. But I'm still here. We survived. Gina's expression softened in a way Mitchell would never have imagined possible when they first met. Yes, she agreed, squeezing his hand gently. We survived. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, the bond. Between them humming with shared emotions, relief, exhaustion, and something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. Finally, Mitchell asked the question that had been forming in his mind since he woke. What now? The veiled hand is still out there. They'll be looking for us. Let them look, Gina said dismissively. Zoravan Prime is vast, and I know many ways to disappear within it. She paused, studying him. Unless you wish to return to your old life? Mitchell considered it briefly. His courier job, his tiny apartment, his solitary existence. It all seemed like a lifetime ago. The mark had changed him, physically and mentally. And the bond with Gina had given him something he hadn't realized he was missing: connection, purpose, belonging. No, he said finally. That life is over. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Gina's lips curved in that not-quite smile that Mitchell had come to recognize as genuine pleasure. Together, she agreed. She reached out, her claws gently tracing the mark on his neck, now an intricate pattern that spread visibly across his skin like a living tattoo. Mine, she said softly, the word carrying none of the possessive threat it had held during their first encounter. Mitchell caught her hand and brought it to his lips. In your mind, he replied, feeling the truth of it through their bond. Gina's purr of contentment filled the room as she leaned down to press her forehead against his, a gesture of affection and belonging in Kithari culture that Mitchell now understood instinctively through their shared bond. The alien Beastwoman had said she'd mark him, and she had meant it, in ways Mitchell could never have imagined. But as he lay there, wounded but healing, bonded to a creature from beyond the stars, Mitchell found that he had no regrets. Life in Zoravan Prime had always been about survival. Now, for the first time, it was about truly living.